All right, welcome to another edition of the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. Welcome to 2026. I am Chris Hinkle, your Blunt Force Conservative. If I look like I just woke up, I kind of just did. We're taking care of our granddaughter during the week when my son and daughter-in-law are at work. So it's fun just to kind of sit back in the recliner in front of the TV and to have a 4 month old. She's 4 months old today, to have her fall asleep on your chest is an amazing feeling. Well, we got a pretty good show today. I've got a good friend of mine, John Nance, is on. John just testified before uh, Congress on the J6 pipe bomber case. John was still in the FBI during that time. He was supervising at Washington field office. But we're going to talk to a little bit more about John about that. So I am gonna let me pull him up here. And I'm welcoming in John Nance. Hello, John.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Great, man. All right. So, just real quick, I'm going to show people where they can find you. And this is John's X page. He is a town hall columnist. He's also with Newsmax. It seems like almost all of us are with Newsmax now. So, John and I actually did a side by side piece, it was pretty nice. I had no idea that it was going to be the two of us that were on that show. It was an evening show. It was shortly after the shooting up in Minnesota, and I don't know how they reached out to you, but I got contacted pretty quick by Salcedo's Chris Salcedo's. I keep calling him Salcedo. Chris Salcedo's producer, and she had initially said, can you come on tomorrow, the next day? And I'm like, sure, yeah, I'll do that for you. And then she said, well, can you come on tonight? And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And then it's like, can you come on in 45 minutes? And I'm like, all right, let me get ready for that. Sometimes I told you guys, John and our little text group, I'm kind of pulling back from some of this media stuff of doing it. I don't mind doing it for Chris Salcedo or anybody at Newsmax. They were the first ones to have me on TV, and for a couple of radio stations. But man, we got so much going on with the granddaughter. But man, every time I turn on Newsmax, you're on it.
Well, every time something really horrible happens, yeah, I get a deluge of text messages. But I'm happy to have the opportunity to give a law enforcement perspective. I mean, from 26 years of law enforcement. And hopefully I'm adding value to the Newsmax audience. That's my objective in any case. So yeah, it's a privilege to do that, and I'm happy to have that opportunity.
Yeah, I spend my time. I haven't done a podcast since December, and as I talked, for those listening in, I told John that we upgraded some equipment here. So I finally broke down. My brother-in-law had been trying to convince me to move over to a Mac. So we are operating off of a 2024 Mac M4 Mini, and I'm really starting to like it. I've had to redo some of my software and relicense some of the software that I use, but it's not that expensive, and I'll write it off in the business anyway. And then kids got me some extra equipment and stuff. So I like it. It's a nice little side hobby to have. But I want to talk to you about your time up on Capitol Hill. Tell me how this came to be, because it was almost like, I think it was before you put it out online, you sent it to our text group, that letter that you received. Had somebody reached out to you beforehand, or was that kind of a surprise? Tell me the whole process of how that worked out.
Well, the letter wasn't a surprise. So yeah, the folks up on Capitol Hill reached out to me. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days before, and my first question was, well, I don't, where did this come from? Who recommended me? And it was an individual that I don't even know recommended me to Loudermilk's staff. So that's pretty much how it happened. Myself and Chris Piotta and another gentleman whose last name is Speciale were selected to participate in this subcommittee hearing. So it was a privilege to do so. But yeah, it was something that really just came out of the blue. I mean, I ascribe it to an act of God, essentially.
Now, something that you may or may not know, and I don't even know if our good friend Chris Piota knows this, but there was somebody else that was initially offered an opportunity to come up and testify before I'm guessing you do know exactly who that person is.
Well, I only know because we've talked about this before. I don't know if Chris knows about it or not. Of course, we sat down for a couple of meals together and hung out for a good bit, and that never came up. So I don't know if he's aware of that or not.
And I don't think he would mind me mentioning this. He is somebody that I do generally know. I've known for over 25 years, and that's Steve Duantano, who was the assistant director in charge of the Washington Field office at that time. And Steve and I were first office agents at Washington Field. He came in about a year before I did, or maybe it was 6 or 8 months. It was pretty close. We were still, when I got there, we were still both on probation. At the time, he was, believe he was working some white collar crime type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then he eventually went down to Quantico to do some teaching down there. We stayed in touch over the years, and then we've gotten back in touch since we both retired. He is doing really well in retirement, but he was scheduled, or they offered for him to come up and testify. And he actually was going to come testify, but he had some conflicts with work that were going to prohibit him from coming there. And I guess that's about the time they probably reached out to Piota. Now, I know that Chris Piota wasn't in the FBI as I wasn't in the FBI during the January 6th stuff, but Chris understands the mechanics of the way things are supposed to work in the FBI. So I thought he was an asset that was there. So tell me what happened next. You get this contact from somebody from Loudermilk's staff that they want you to come up and testify. What happened next?
Well, I mean, we settled on a date for when I was supposed to arrive, which was the day before. But shout out to a fellow Regent law school graduate. One of the individuals on the staff reached out and was able to meet her, and that was a really interesting conversation and really nice to see another Regent University Law School grad, especially in that particular setting. So really the day of, we got there about 9:30 in the morning, and it was, quite a long brief. And most of it really was Chris and I providing input to the Loudermilk staff. They had a lot of questions, actually, a lot of gaps that they wanted to have filled in. It's really interesting. You assume that people in that position, you assume that Congress has a much better working knowledge of federal agencies. At least I did. I thought, these people, I mean, at least they might know some more of the rudimentary mechanisms, but they really didn't. And was really happy to be able to fill in some of those blanks for them. But of course, a lot of it was going over material, stuff that I haven't seen before. And I all this stuff I believe is publicly available. If people haven't read the full government's memorandum in support of pretrial detention on Cole, they need to read the entire document. When Judge Pirro says that his confession was detailed, that's actually an understatement. Cole provided information that only the bomb maker would have, including exactly how the timers were set. In fact, they were set to the maximum of 60 minutes, and Cole knew that and confessed that to the agents the day that he was interviewed. In fact, another interesting point is he was given 2 separate opportunities to stop the interview, and he declined to do so. So a lot of really good stuff in there.
Real quick on that, I had a conversation. I was going back and forth in a debate with a woman that said that she had a child that was autistic, and that all they want to do is just please and give the answers. And that comes from a lack of understanding on her part about the way these interviews are conducted. It's not where, did you plant the bomb here? Well, yeah, I planted the bomb there. No, it's like, what did you do this day? And then when they give you information, it either confirms or corroborates or generates more questions based on the evidence that you've collected. So if you say, okay, if you get to the point in the interview where they've detailed how they put this bomb together, you just say, okay, well, where'd you get these parts? Oh, well, I got them at XYZ store. And then you
Mhm.
look at the evidence and it's XYZ store. So the more that the more that Cole kept corroborating the information that was already available, that that to me, uh, it has nothing to do with whether or not he's autistic. And I still haven't seen anybody outside of his defense counsel or grandmother say that he's autistic. Was there anything in that report that I missed? There was a medical report from a doctor that said he was autistic.
No, it's based on a simple assertion by the defense that he's level 1 on the autism spectrum. But look, the whole argument's absurd. Do you know who else is on the autism spectrum? Elon
Yeah,
Musk.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Albert Einstein was speculated to be on the spectrum. There are a lot of very high functioning, high level individuals that are on the autism spectrum. So that's just it's another blaze, attempt to deflect from the fact that Baker and his buddy had their story retracted when they
And
really
that's
got
Steve Baker from the Blaze.
yeah, Steve Baker, when they really got out ahead over their skis and went with information that they had not fully vetted, things that they had not fully corroborated, and they're just plain wrong. They're wrong about the matter. Like I stated in my testimony, Trump's FBI got their man, and that's what has happened. That's the bottom line, and we'll see how this plays out in court. But a lot of the disinformation that's floating around out there is based on arguments that the defense has made. Well, what do you expect them to say? Our client is guilty? It's absurd. And frankly, the best thing that could ever happen to the prosecution is for the defense to take Kyle Seraphin seriously.
And we're going to talk about Mr. Seraphin here in just a little bit.
Yeah.
And some of his others. I had already teased out to people that we were going to talk about how to get yourself fired from the FBI. It's actually very difficult to do, and we have somebody that did it twice. Which is really something in my over 20 years in the FBI. And I didn't see anybody get fired twice. I've seen some people get fired once, and I've seen some people get fired.
That's an accomplishment. That's an accomplishment.
That is an accomplishment.
Yeah.
He should put that in his bio. All right. So you show up, you get this briefing. Was there anything that when you guys talked with them that you said, well, here's the way I see this? Or when Chris Piota would say, well, this is the way things are supposed to work. Or when you said, well, actually, this is what we were doing. You were on the surveillance, one of the surveillance squad supervisors at the time. Was there anything that you guys brought to life that they were like, wow, we didn't know that?
Yeah. I don't know how much detail I want to get into it in an open setting like this, but Chris made some really good points, more as to administrative process that they were not aware of, that would really help them kind of see into how the pipe bomber investigation progressed or rather stalled. Because essentially, one of the interesting things to see was the frequency of the updates, right? You know how these things go in major cases. Headquarters wants to know, or the office wants to know every day. They want a daily update, right? I mean, if this is a big case, a significant case. So for a period of about 60 days, right at 60 days, they were wanting daily updates. All of a sudden, it goes to monthly updates. So you can see how the misdirection or the reallocation of resources was being dedicated to chasing individuals who were guilty of nothing more essentially than federal trespassing. Grandmas who went sightseeing on Capitol Hill that day, essentially all the kind of bad stuff that you've heard about the J6 investigation. Not to say that there weren't real criminals present, and I touched on that in my opening statement, but there were real criminals present, and there were real substantive acts of violence that were conducted, and people were rightly arrested and prosecuted for those offenses. But you and I both know that there were the vast majority of the people that were there were not involved in any of that sort of thing. So, but it also touches on narrative. I don't know if you want to get into that right now, but if you want to talk more about the mechanics of how the hearing went and the process leading up to it went, we can kind of
let's talk
stick to
about the
that for now.
mechanics real quick. So, so that we're painting a picture for those that are listening and watching. So you show up on Capitol Hill. Is there like a certain door that you go through? Do you just go through the front door and hey, I'm here? Or how does all of that work?
No, well, day one, we actually showed up. I mean, we took an Uber from the hotel over to, I can't remember the name of the building. It's essentially where um, they're congressional office buildings. I can't remember. We actually gave our testimony in the Rayburn building, which I've been in before. It was, I don't know, it was maybe 3 or 4 blocks away. So 9:30 in the morning, that's kind of where we start our day. And we're in typical government office space. And there was Loudermilk's counsel was there, as well as another congressional staffer who's a former MARSOC guy, a really cool guy, really interesting to talk to. And there was another individual, and I'm not mentioning their names because I don't know if they want their names out there, but there was another individual who's actually another retired bureau guy who's been hired on to provide advice essentially to not just Loudermilk but to Jordan's staff, and he's had a tremendous amount of input with regard to who gets called and to some degree how these hearings are structured. I mean, he has input on that. Ultimately, of course, the chair like Loudermilk or Jordan will make those bigger decisions, of course. But a great group of people, real experience, intellectually curious individuals who sincerely want to get to the bottom of these issues. They want for the American people to understand, and in this particular case, how the pipe bomb investigation got derailed and why it only took Patel's FBI just a matter of weeks to bring this to the place where it is now. I hesitate to say resolve because, as Bongino has said, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. We have this individual, of course, innocent until proven guilty, but we have Brian Cole Jr. Under arrest and looking at trial. So, but there's more to this investigation. There are a ton of questions surrounding it, and people can rest assured that Loudermilk and his staff are sincerely committed to getting to the truth of the matter. That's what these people are doing there. They're not just sitting there collecting a paycheck. They're concerned with, making sure that the truth comes out, and that this kind of a thing doesn't happen again. But yeah, so we began in that building. And man, if you really want to know, I could probably look it up real quick if you give me a second.
Is it not far from Washington Field Office, the main headquarters?
No, not too far. Here, hang on one second.
I mean, you can pretty much walk from WFO to the Capitol. It's not that big of a hike.
No, it's not. I don't know. I don't see it in this message.
So,
right off.
So you show up, you've got this briefing and stuff. It's for those of us on the outside now, I had friends that worked in congressional affairs when I was at WFO, and there were some interactions that we had with congressmen. They always get involved. They give you briefing packets and things like that. But what I wanted to talk about was the difference between the congressional investigations and actual FBI investigations, because when I look back over some of the hearings that they've held before, there's just a lot of information that's missing, and I'm not sure if it's just because of the politics of it that they don't put it forth, or it's the limited ability of some of the investigators. The staff members, by and large, are not trained investigators, and it's very telling when you see them kind of sitting up behind the people that are on the panel, the Congress people, and the way that the questions are asked and the way that the questions are framed. To me, it feels it's not a way that I would ask questions. I tend to ask more open-ended questions, and then see where that goes, and then there's follow-up questions. What I saw from this hearing, and I thought you guys did a bang-up job there, but it was still the same theater of the absurd of these people in Congress. For example, let me play this one clip here. I'm sure you probably had to contain your laughter, but check this out.
I would just commend to everybody the testimony of Pamela Hemphill, who was a convicted insurrectionist and yet was pardoned. She rejected her pardon.
Mr. Romano, did you prosecute anyone related to January 6th for engaging in an insurrection?
No, Congresswoman.
I didn't think so. So Mr. Raskin's statement that someone was a convicted insurrectionist is actually inaccurate. Isn't that correct?
I wouldn't say it's inaccurate. Well, a convicted insurrectionist.
She wasn't a convicted insurrectionist, was she?
Would the gentlelady yield?
No, I will not. Mr. Romano.
Do you accept seditious conspiracy as insurrection?
Mr. Romano, I will reclaim my time. Mr. Romano, did you prosecute anyone for engaging in an insurrection related to January 6th?
For the crime of
You
insurrection?
did not.
I thought that was hilarious. It would have been very difficult to contain a smile or my laughter during that. God bless that lady, and she's the one that destroyed Lynn Cheney out in Arizona. But the way that will the gentlelady yield? No, I will not.
I thought that was great. When Crockett's little diatribe too, it was all I could do to keep from laughing. Raskin.
Hey, where's her accent? Where's the ghetto girl accent? She's kind of gotten away from it.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe it went the same place Hillary Clinton's Southern Belle accent went. I really don't know, but there is a very big element of political theater involved in all of this stuff. And kind of back to your original question, the staffers, they don't know what they don't know, and that's part of what Chris and I were trying to do while we were there. Like they simply don't know where to go to act. They don't know the right people to ask to get the level of information that they're seeking. And
it seems some of them get a lot of information online. There's some people out there that do a really good job of deep dive digging, Mike Benz and people like that, but they're still not trained investigators. And, I see too many of them. They operate from a position of confirmation bias where they've got a thought of this is the way it is. Let me go take a look. Let me go see if I can find something to back up what I think. Whereas when we conduct investigations with the FBI, we just let the evidence kind of directs where we go. You can kind of start off with, I think that, John Nance is guilty of this, but then you're still proving or disproving the allegation, and you don't get pigeonholed into, you get a little piece of information that indicates you might have done it, and then you ignore the 10 things that would clearly show that you didn't. That's been the problem that I have, I think, with some of these congressional investigations. I think they would do really well if you have somebody that knows the right people, like you were talking about. If I was on a congressional, if they hired me to be on a congressional staff and they said, we need to look into this matter, I would say, okay, let's subcontract out. Let's get these guys right here to take a look at it, and then let them give us the information. And it is what it is. I know from having worked with or know some of the staff here in local politics, and from my time up in DC, the first 7 years I was there, the staffers have a political agenda, and it can eke into those investigations. And that's one of my concerns there. But you were talking about the data. Let me play this clip real quick, and we're going to talk about the phone data, because that was a big topic of, did the Biden administration sit on this? Did they know anything? So let's take a look at this.
There is evidence pointing that Brian Cole Jr. was present in all three of the FBI's most obvious evidentiary buckets: cell phone data, license plate reader data, and financial transactions. Is it plausible that FBI investigators knew Cole's identity as early as February 2021?
I think it's not just plausible, I think it's likely.
First, real quick, good to see you in a suit. Maybe if you got a chance to bump into Kash Patel, you could mention to him. God, I feel like a broken record every time I see him not in a suit. I like the guy.
Yeah.
Don't know him, but stop with wearing anything but a suit.
Yeah, he could improve on his suit game.
Yeah, he needs somebody on his side to go, don't do that. You don't. When you take a group picture with individuals and everybody's in a suit but you kind of stand out for the wrong reasons.
I can't disagree. Yeah.
So you were talking about the cell phone data. Now, initially, I know when this stuff was starting to kick off and they were looking back into the J6 stuff, I had somebody, and one or two people that we both know, that had asked me about it. And I said, well, if I was going to do anything, it's really hard to go back and redo an investigation. You can go back and do an autopsy on the investigation and say, here's where it was missed, and maybe ask some follow-up questions. I don't just say this. I know this from what I and my squad had to do down here in Jackson when we reopened the Mississippi burning case and when we were working some of the civil rights cold cases. There's only so much you can do. And you can go back and look at those cases and say, okay, here's some things that could have been asked, and maybe you can't ask them now. Maybe the person doesn't exist, like in a lot of the cases that we had. But one of the things I said, the first thing that I said was, they still should have all that cell phone data, all of the geofence stuff, all of the, everything from cell towers and stuff. You should be able to narrow that down to a smaller group. And then from that, conduct some, assign some analysts to look into it, and then break that down into an even more, a smaller group to look into things. And then from that, you may send some people out to start conducting some initial cursory interviews. You'll notice that there's one thing that I haven't said this entire time, and that would be, at no point would I've said, hey, let's look at gait analysis of how this person walked. I'm looking for things tangible because gait analysis, even if it is a thing, it's still an opinion of somebody that based on my opinion, I'm looking at this. It's similar to the people that get into kinesiology in interviews where they're talking about body movements and body language and stuff. And in all of the classes, all of the training, everything that I've ever done, I've never come across any interview, any interrogation that I've done from the United States to Baghdad to Sweden that body language gave me any indications of deception or truthfulness. I mean, it might guide me in an area that I think, okay, well, I'm starting to make this person uncomfortable. How can I utilize this during the interview to get them to be more forthcoming with me? But this gait analysis thing, you and I both thought that was ridiculous from the start. I was surprised that the Blaze and Steve Baker and his ilk were just so hardcore on it, rather than just saying, well, maybe we got this wrong. And I think that once the attorneys got involved in it at the Blaze, that was why it was retracted so quick. But getting back to the telephone data, I was glad to see that they looked into that and started narrowing it down. Was there anything that you saw that gave you indications that, or expound upon what Jeanine Pirro said? She said resources were diverted. Now I have some ideas, and I'll talk about those in a minute, about how resources end up getting diverted in cases like this. I don't know. Did you see anything that was nefarious that, hey, we kind of know this guy, this is the guy that did it, but he doesn't fit a narrative, so we can't go with that right now? I don't know if that would be the impetus behind let's shift resources away from it so we're not looking into it, as much as that might make us uncomfortable. Maybe we focus on this here. I don't know. I still don't know if there was anything nefarious behind it. Did you get any information, any indication, any conversations that you had that we know it's Cole, but he doesn't fit the narrative. So we're going to have to just stop looking at him.
No, you're not going to get a smoking gun like that. I think this is what happens. Well, I would guarantee you what happened was, in part anyway, is you had headquarters to headquarters discussions. And what I mean by that is DOJ to FBI headquarters discussions about what the messaging coming from the White House was. And a lot of people don't understand that the Attorney General is the FBI director's immediate boss. It's not, they're not equivalent. You got AG and you got FBI director. So when you have someone like Merrick Garland having a conversation with Christopher Wray, who, he's a careerist, right? So careerists are very risk. They don't have a lot of risk tolerance. And one of the things that was a little bit frustrating about the testimony process, I really didn't have a chance to go into any detail about that stuff. I kind of got started at one point and then got cut off, which, hey, I was just, I was glad to be there to be able to give my opening statement and hopefully to add some value to the discussion. But what likely happened is you had a discussion between the AG and the FBI director, and the AG saying, well, we know what the narrative is from the White House. This is the season of the insurrectionist, right? This is the white, the white male extremist. This is the narrative coming from the White House, and likely commanders can communicate their intent without doing so verbally. So I'm sure that's probably what happened on the 7th floor. Like, okay, pipe bomber, but this is where we need to be going. We need to be focusing our resources on these insurrectionists from the Capitol Hill. And I don't think anybody said we're not going to pay attention to the pipe bomber. I don't think that was explicit. I think it was implicit. I think it was implied in the I'm sure very strong direction to, this is the number one priority. This case, this biggest case that the Bureau has ever engaged itself in, this is the priority. So as well as I do, that trickles all the way down, all through the different levels at WFO. And so you have the SSA on, whatever DT squad or whatever it was on. And the message is clear. Resources are not coming your way. And did it rise to the level of, well, we have this subject, Brian Cole. Did they know that back in 2021? I think it's likely based on they had all the they had the purchasing data. They had the T-Mobile data, but it hadn't been decoded or whatever. And that's another big question that came up, especially kind of in the briefing session that morning. If they got data from T-Mobile that they couldn't demystify, why wouldn't you go back to T-Mobile and say, we can't unravel this in its current composition? Why wouldn't you? You don't even have to be a tech agent to do that. Mm-hmm. And some of this got confused with I think the AT&T data, which they had and said was corrupted. I'm not a tech agent. I've never been a technically trained agent or any of that stuff, but just in layman's terms, AT&T housed some of this data on a hard drive that somehow became corrupted when they went to download the data because it produced so much data. So the hard drive gets corrupted. AT&T says, well, this batch, I guess, is corrupted. Maybe that's the best way to put it. But later on, they came back and said, well, we have this other tranche of data that is not corrupted. And I think Ray, and I think maybe some of the folks involved in the investigation used that as a crutch, essentially to say, well, the cell phone tower data is corrupted, therefore we're stalled. When I think that was just an excuse for resources are being diverted elsewhere. And I think it was Loudermilk, maybe it was Loudermilk, I can't remember who. One of them said essentially, so what you're saying is that the FBI wasn't interested in the RNC headquarters and DNC headquarters security. I think Piota answered that question, and he said essentially, well, that's kind of how the facts lie. So I don't think you had any express, we're ignoring this because, we have this, particular subject, even though I think they were very, very close if they did not know that it was, potentially a blackmail subject that lived in Woodbridge. Another piece of information that complicated or confused the investigation is you have 2 eyewitnesses that said that they saw that the pipe bomber was a white male. So that fit the narrative coming from the White House, right? So how easy is it, for an investigator or investigators to kind of sit back and, another thing that was brought up too, you most likely had initially your more seasoned, more experienced investigators handling this case. And as resources are drawn away, you know how this works as well as I do. The case gets kicked downhill to the less and less experienced individuals on the squad. So I think it would probably.
I was actually thinking that same thing, having witnessed it myself from working big cases. You get a case and you're moving forward on it, and then you go to the analyst and go, "Hey, where's that data that I gave you? I'm sorry, the SAC pulled me off. There's a headquarters, has got this priority matter that has to be looked into. I'll look at it later." And then, finally get the analyst back, and then the person that's going to go through and use either analyst notebook, or I guess they would use AI today, of looking through some of the testimony. Now they get pulled off on something else. And eventually you get to, a seasoned agent is going to say, well, I've gone as far as I can with this. I think it's this person or one of these 5 people. But until I get this stuff to corroborate that, I can't move forward with this. And that even happens at the DOJ level. You go over and the assistant U.S. attorney that you're working with is pulled off on another matter. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about that case you were working. Eventually it gets handed off to somebody. And it may have even gotten to a point where, some young agent comes onto the squad or gets transferred in after a 3 or 5 year rotational transfer. And they're like, okay, well, I inherited this case. And then it lays dormant for a while. I don't think that I like you. I don't think that they were like, it's Cole, but he doesn't fit this descriptor. I do think that Cole's name possibly came up and there may have been people working the case. But yeah, I kind of agree with what Piro was saying, that resources were diverted off because the priority coming from the White House was, we got to make an example out of these people, that many of them were just trespassing. The majority of them were just trespassing. And I've been on record with that.
I think that's the fundamental issue. And I tried to make that point. I think that is the fundamental issue. This case demonstrates how dangerous narrative-driven investigations are, right? Because it strips away it strips away the most basic aspect of any investigation, which is simply, just the facts, ma'am. Follow the facts, logically to their conclusion. So instead of that type of investigation, which we got with Kash Patel and with former Deputy Director Bongino, that's exactly what we got. And we ended up with a subject in 6 weeks. And it really can't be understated. When you take out ideologically driven people and you put people in positions like this that are not doctrinaire, that are individuals that are simply wanting to get to the truth and let's follow the facts where they take us. These are the results that you get. So people should be very encouraged by that. This is a win. It's a win for the American people. This is not how you want to run a case. And I agree with Chris's statement that this was a salvage operation, right? I think that's a very apt description. This was a salvage operation, and the good guys came in and did what should have been done from the very, very beginning. I think they probably had Cole's identification, but that subject description didn't fit the narrative. It didn't fit their theory of the case, right? This is supposed to be white male, violent extremist stuff. And this guy is a black male, and without any other real supporting, I don't think until the T-Mobile data is very, very powerful, because if you look at the government's argument to keep Cole in detention until trial, they go through point by point, and the T-Mobile data assigned to Cole's phone matches the video surveillance by seconds. Sometimes by a couple of seconds, sometimes by 10 seconds, 15 seconds.
Mhm.
But that's what you're talking about the whole time. The whole time, the hoodie individual, the masked hooded individual appears on video footage. The T-Mobile data corroborates what you're seeing on that video footage within a matter of seconds. This is, whatever. We don't have access to all the information, right? We don't have to have access to all the data, but just what has been presented by the government so far is as the government describes, overwhelming evidence. I mean, just the fact that he sat there and he told the investigators, well, the timers were set to 60 minutes.
Mhm.
Yeah, the
I
pipe bomber would know that. And that was information that came as part of him telling his story. And he was telling his story about having the pipe bombs in his shoebox in the back of the car, and he put them in the backpack to transport them and all that stuff. So
So the other thing, and before we move on from this and get to what people probably really want to hear about how to get fired from the FBI, is the decision-making process. I've had arguments with some very well-known people, and I'm not trying to drop names or anything like that. I've got some people with millions of followers that follow me. I got some people with like 16 followers that follow. To me, sometimes when I say things online, as FX Reagan and I have talked about it, and I'm not mentioning his name. You and I both know exactly what his real name is. But as I've told him, sometimes my replies are not meant for the person that I'm replying to. It's for others. But the decision-making process, I get frustrated when I hear people talk about disbanding the FBI and they want all of the agents fired. Like you hear these idiots that we're going to talk about here in a minute. There's still this number of agents that worked on, Crossfire Hurricane or worked on Arctic Frost, and they haven't been fired yet. Well, what exactly are you going to fire these street agents for? It's the same thing with the J6 stuff. And our good friends at WWDB out of Philadelphia, Ada Nestor and Gary Heasley, they were initially part of that, disband the FBI and these street agents should be fired, until we explained to them, well, here's the way this works. What am I firing them for? Well, they went out and effected an arrest on a J6 person that all they did was trespass. Okay, so you're telling me
in good faith.
In good faith. So
in good
you're
faith,
telling me that this agent received an arrest warrant signed off by a judge. That before that, there was an affidavit that was written by somebody that was given to the judge. The judge looked at it and said, I believe this person committed a crime. I'm directing you to go get this person and bring them to my court. That's due process. Fight it out in the court. There's a viral video out there of a guy that he said he has been a protester for 35 years. And he goes, I don't have any scars on my head. I never been beaten up or anything like that. You know why? Because there's a line. And when I step across that line and I get arrested, I do exactly what they tell me to do. And I fight it out in court. And he said, that's the way I've done it for 35 years. And so when you try to put all of your angst and the fact that you want somebody to go to jail, it's not going to resolve anything by firing a street agent or putting a street agent in jail for doing exactly what the law told him to do, which is go get this person. Now, the decisions before it got down to that street agent, those things were made at the DOJ FBI headquarters level. The senior leadership make the decisions. This is the direction we're going. And that dovetails back to the J6 stuff with the arrest. That was the priority of the White House. We want to make an example out of these individuals. Let's go get them. Let's pull that telephone data. They were really hard charged at taking that telephone data and doing all kinds of cross-referencing with it and identifying individuals and going to get them. And, you know, we've got our little buddy out there, Kyle Seraphin, trying to disparage the new deputy director or co-deputy director of the FBI, Chris Rea, saying that he oversaw an investigation with an individual falsely accused or falsely investigated. Well, that mistakes do happen, but you know what? There were a lot of mistakes that happened during the J6 stuff too. And I don't hear people highlighting that. There was I think it was a lady that got her door kicked in Alaska. And when they went in and arrested her, it was based off of that. They thought she was in the area. They saw a photo of her and they went and got her. It turned out it wasn't her. Those things do happen. But to try to put it on somebody like Chris Rea, I don't know him. I don't know if you crossed paths with him when you were in the FBI. The first time I had even heard of him was when he went down to New Orleans to clean up the mess of that ASAC in the New Year's Eve terrorist event right before the Sugar Bowl. Right. And he had to go down there and clean the mess up because the special agent in charge decided he wanted to be on vacation, which that in itself is a problem. You got a major event going on in your city and it's New Year's Eve and you want to take vacation right then. No, you need to be in town. I don't want to get off track.
Well, look, these are the same people who falsely accused Steve Jensen. There has yet to be one individual to come out and corroborate George Hill's story. I'll call it that. Everybody that we know that knows Steve Jensen has never even heard him so much as use a swear word. Everything that we know and have heard about Jensen completely contradicts George Hill's story. It completely contradicts what Kyle Seraphin and Steve Friend and the rest of these clowns have to say. In fact, Kyle Seraphin himself admitted that he completely got the G5 pilot story wrong. He accused him of being the case agent on the Mar-a-Lago raid when that individual had nothing to do with it. Kyle Seraphin is routinely wrong. And all you have to do, you don't have to take my word for it. Look at his disgusting feed. This is from a guy who actively advocates for the repeal of the 19th Amendment. So all you ladies out there, Kyle Seraphin thinks that you shouldn't have the right to vote. I can't imagine what else he thinks in private. So, he'll say when he gets called on it, he'll say that's hyperbole. No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not.
The other thing, and he was posting here today, and I replied to it. He was talking about the case with Christopher Rea, and he said, "Well, yeah, he was, when it was pointed out by Ben Williamson that he was violent. He was the violent crime ASAC. But he moved over to national security. Well,
so
national
what?
security is a broad branch, and as I pointed out, and I actually called FBI Houston today. They have 5 ASAC there. I'm betting that they had at least 4 during the time of the J6 stuff when all of those cases were going on. Just because you worked on national security, more than likely that was just an umbrella term that they were using. He may have been over the counterintelligence program.
Well, we got to cut him a little slack because Kyle, with his vast 4.5 to 5 years of FBI experience, he just I think he's missing a few things. The guy's clueless about headquarters structure. The guy is clueless about what executive management does. The guy is clueless about even what a frontline supervisor does from day to day. So
he tried to talk about, look, it's a 266-0 case. No, a 266-0 case is the 0 file. That's where you get information in that might be enough for a case, maybe close enough for a case, but you don't have the resources or whatever to work on it. So you move it over to the 0 file.
Exactly.
And
so you can't even get that right. But look, the guy traffics in what people don't know. right?
Yeah.
That's what this guy does. His only real talent is in producing word clouds. And people don't know how the Bureau works. People have no idea when he's right or wrong. I mean, the general public, or the people that he attempts to appeal to. So anyway, I could go on and on about this clown.
Yeah,
but
it's sad, the individuals that follow him, and he'll try to use something like, even if he takes a look at this, or somebody brings, you're in my conversation here today, to his attention, that, oh, well, look, I'm in their head and they're focused on me. We really don't focus on him. People bring stuff to me. I have the guy muted. I have him muted. Steve Friend muted. I have Phil Kennedy muted. I have that George Hill muted. They're just idiots.
I like to say that he barely even qualifies as a hobby. Not even that these days.
Well,
I don't want to say. There's been some bad blood in the past between myself and an individual. If I mentioned his name, everybody would know who he was. We've resolved that. So yeah. Kyle Seraphin really is just he's struggling for relevance. The grift is strong with that guy, and he's based his entire online persona. And people don't know, this is the same guy that used to laugh and castigate people who were on social media at all. This is the guy. So, but if you want to talk about how to get fired by the FBI, that'll be a fun conversation.
Yeah. So the thing that I put out, and real quick on him, the way I kind of got pulled into some of the things that he was doing was, I was getting some questions from a couple of media people that we know, and that dealt with the New York Epstein file stuff. And I said from the very beginning, when media was reporting out there, they've been hiding stuff from Cash and from Pam Bondi. That's not possible. The 99.9% of the case file is electronic. The rest of it is documented, that it's somewhere. It can't be, physically. You can't take a box and put it in, a physical, box into the electronic database. You can have a record that you have this physical box. All that information was available to Kash Patel from day one. Mm-hmm. And I called Pam Bondi out on it when she said, I want the Epstein file on my desk. What do you mean? You want the truckloads of, semi-truckloads of evidence brought over to you? Or could you just walk down the street and go sit in the FBI office and log into the electronic case file system, and you can read everything? There's nothing redacted from the director or the attorney general. They had access to it. But you had this kid, this Seraphin kid, and I call him that because he's like 20 years younger than I am. But you had him out there trying to traffic in misinformation, that files were being destroyed. They were being shredded. And I think at the same time, he said there's going to be a mass walkout of agents. And all these things he was consistently wrong on.
That didn't happen. What about, don't forget the whole honeypot story, which they were completely wrong about.
We could talk an hour on that. So getting to how you get fired. So let me say, for the record, and if you want to call me to testify on this, I will. I'll give you my 20 plus years in the FBI experience on this. Neither Kyle Seraphin, Steve Friend, Philip Kennedy, George Hill, or the other dude, and I'm not even going to mention his name because they mistaken. I think my personal opinion is he shouldn't have been reinstated. None of them were whistleblowers. There's none of them. Just because you testify before Congress, just because you say I'm going to make a whistleblower claim, doesn't make you a whistleblower.
You've got to do it the right way.
There has to be more to it than that. The things that got them fired. So, all right, we'll start with Kyle Seraphin. He got fired for unprofessional behavior. It was a consistent theme in his career in the FBI. I know that you supervised him for a while. You and I have had conversations about this. He was a toxic individual in the workplace, an annoyance. He got fired because he stepped over the line with a local school resource officer, and that was the impetus behind, all right, we just can't deal with this guy anymore. He's a problem. He's more of a liability than assets. Time to cut bait. That's why he got fired. And even he would admit that, because that's what the letter that he received from OPR the investigation that was being conducted said, this is based on your unprofessional conduct. The video or the audio that he played of the female SSA conducting that investigation, she said, you got the letter, didn't you? You know what this is about, right? Steve Friend wasn't fired for being a whistleblower. Do you know what Steve Friend did that kind of said, all right, we're going to have to suspend you?
Well, yeah, he surreptitiously recorded his supervisor in FBI space.
Yep.
That's a huge security problem, not to mention a violation of state law.
And then what happened while he was on suspension, there's something that he did that would make it very difficult for you to regain or maintain a top secret security clearance. And what was that?
Yeah, well, giving an interview to one of the most widely known Russian propaganda sites, Russia Today, that can tend to pose a problem on a national security polygraph. But I don't mean to steal your thunder, but if you really, really want to get fired by the FBI, threaten the director's life. That'll get you fired all day long.
That'll get you fired a second time.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was a threat. Anybody listening to it with half a brain cell could tell that was a threat. When I first heard it, I'm like, all right, what's going to happen about this? And I was shocked. The thing I was shocked about was how quickly it got addressed. And that can happen when you threaten the director. All right. So another guy, and man, you must be like a magnet to these people. You technically supervised this Kennedy guy. He was brought over to you really. while he was being processed to be escorted out. His was just poor work ethic. I've talked to people that know him. I talked to people, even other people that were in a supervisory chain dealing with him that knew him really well, that gave him every opportunity. He was placed on a performance improvement plan, a PIP. And that's where they go through the criteria that's required of you at your grade and skill level and tenure in the FBI to say, here's the things you need to do to get back to being at least minimally successful in your career. They gave him an outline and a plan to do that. I know how difficult it is to supervise somebody like that. When I got down to Jackson, there was a guy, he had been a problem for years. He had some issues where he was just terrified of leaving the office. And it's very hard to effect an arrest from your desk. You actually have to go out and physically do some work. So they put him on me and they said, he's on a PIP. You got to fix him. And we're going to give you 90 days to make that happen. So as a supervisor, you often spend 90% of your time supervising 10% of the people that work with you. And I had to dedicate probably 95% of my time. I got him to where at least I could give him a minimally successful performance appraisal. And he was able to finally retire. This guy at least lasted, I think he was 27 years in the FBI. So here I show up as a young supervisor with less than 10 years in the FBI, and I'm supervising a guy that had been in since the 80s. And that was a difficult thing to do. So, dealing with a guy like that, he wasn't a whistleblower either. You can put it as your moniker, you can claim whatever you want to do. The other individual that we were talking about was that analyst, George Hill. So when I heard that he made these allegations against Steve Jensen, and I know Steven Jensen, I worked with him. He was an ASAC in the Jackson division. I didn't work for him. I worked with him. He came in several years after I did in the Bureau, probably like 6 or 7 years after. I was working primarily for the SAC, but I did deal with him a lot. And he's, like you said, never heard him cuss, get angry or anything like that. So when I heard about this testimony from Hill, rather than coming out in initial knee-jerk reaction about, hey, you're wrong, and standing up to Hill, I said, well, let me go back and take a look at the testimony. So I took a look at the testimony of Hill, and I took a look at the testimony of Steven. And it was about 150 plus pages in the congressional transcript of their testimony. Here's what I'll say. One of those two people perjured themselves before Congress, is what I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because either George Hill's lying or Stephen Jensen's lying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I'll add on top of that is, and I don't know, I haven't seen the entire congressional investigation. I don't even know if that's public, the background stuff that they do. But I didn't see anybody else get called to testify when Hill said, well, Jensen said this on a secure video teleconference call that hundreds, maybe thousands, over 1,000 people were on. Why is it this Hill guy's the only one that heard that said he heard Jensen say this? No one else has come forward. No one. Now, is that where the congressional staffers said, well, we need to at least get one or two more people that said, I heard the same thing? Or was it because it was being pushed by the Democrats on the left with Hill? Was it just they chose not to even ask? That because if they had, if it was me, it'd be very easy to go look at who was on that call and pull somebody else in. Hey, did you hear this? Nope.
Yeah, but it fit the narrative back then, right?
Yep.
That's why so many of these guys. That's why we're even talking about so many of these guys, because what they had to say fit, and I hate to say it, but it fit the Republican narrative. And the FBI was doing things worthy of censure, right?
Yeah.
But these individuals were not the individuals to put out in front on these issues. There were other people that could have that could have spoken to those matters directly. And I always point to the IRS whistleblowers. They did it the right way. They didn't make it about themselves. They always made it about the issues. You didn't see them on social media running their mouths, denigrating the entire IRS workforce, attacking individuals, denigrating women, behaving in wildly unprofessional way. You didn't see any of that stuff from the IRS whistleblowers, and look at where they are today. You compare that to the individuals that we've been talking about. Look at where those guys are today. Steve Friend had his job back, and was happy to go back. And in fact, even after writing a piece that ended up in the Federalist of all places, where he argued for the disarmament of FBI agents, but he couldn't wait to get that firearm back. That should tell people exactly what the real motivations are here. And now he's back to the same old game, defund the FBI, fire Kash Patel, all this other nonsense, because what? He threatens the directors. He threatens the director on Kyle Serafin's silly little basement level podcast. It gets back to the director. And I don't know, you work for any business and you threaten the CEO, you don't think you're going to get fired?
The other thing is too, and I notice he backs away from this, or at least he's never addressed it that I've seen, is, okay, you said that you haven't gotten your back pay. Well, post your reinstatement agreement. You obviously, you and your attorneys came to an agreement, the same attorneys that ended up firing him as well. But you and your attorneys got together, you came up with this reinstatement agreement to put you back inside the FBI, put it online. You have a copy of it. Let's see where the FBI violated it. If they violated it, I'll be the first one to say, hey, give the man his money. You agreed to give him the money, whether I think he should have the money or not. Give him his money if you agreed to it. But mate, what if there's a stipulation in there that if you engage in this type of behavior, you forfeit all of that? I don't know. But let's wait
here. Look, so is it Steve Deese? Steve Deese, is that how you pronounce his name? He has Friend on his podcast too, and he said, well, he was taking great umbrage at the fact that Steve had been summarily dismissed, and said he was going to reach out to Grassley's office and get to the bottom of this. And I thought to myself at the time, I can't wait for him to hear what Grassley has to say. So Grassley's response was very perfunctory. And down at the very bottom of it, you know what Grassley said? Grassley said this, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. He said that hiring and firing decisions are best left to the FBI. So that's bureaucratic speak for saying I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. He got fired for doing something he shouldn't have done, and we're done with this guy.
Yeah, you don't want to, if a congressman or a senator has bent over backwards to try to help you and get you something reinstated. You don't want to go out and do something to embarrass them. Here's the other thing too: just because you get reinstated, and that other guy, and I'm not going to mention his name on here because he's back to being an FBI agent, but he gets reinstated, it doesn't mean that he was a whistleblower. It doesn't mean that I don't know what his reinstatement agreement was. I would bet that the reinstatement agreement doesn't say we agree that you are a whistleblower and that's why you were fired. What likely, and I know this from people that got their job back, because one of those 10 I actually spoke with and asked him about getting reinstated. He wasn't a whistleblower. He was summarily dismissed and administratively dismissed from the FBI, and they went back and looked at it and said, we did this wrong. The process was wrong. The things that they did were wrong. It doesn't, he didn't come out and go to Congress and say, hey, I'm making a protected disclosure or anything like that a whistleblower did. He just filed for reinstatement. And some individuals get an automatic appeal. Somebody like me that was military, a 5-point veterans preference, if they tried to fire me, it's an immediate appeal. I don't even have to lobby for an appeal. But I know this other individual appealed the decision. I listened to his story. You've talked to him. And I said, dude, this was definitely some retribution that was taken against you because of a decision that you made. It wasn't about whistleblowing or anything. So I don't want people to think just because, Kennedy did things to get himself fired. Friend got himself fired twice, 3 times if you count his attorney. Kyle, did he just finally give up on it, or did they actually send him the you're terminated paperwork? I've heard.
I think he ultimately ended up resigning. So, but yeah, the guy that we're talking about, that we don't really need to mention his name. See, again, even if we mentioned his name, no one would know who that guy is.
Yeah.
Because again, he did it the right way, right? He wasn't out there promoting himself, trying to cash in on the FBI derangement syndrome, trying to make it all about himself. This is a guy who the Bureau did not treat fairly, and he's got his job back. Yep. So these stories about these individuals who do it the right way and are successful tell you everything you need to know about these guys who did it the wrong way for the wrong reasons, and you see where they are today.
Now, that guy, I actually asked him about the back pay issue, because he had gotten his job back, and I said, hey, did you get your back pay yet? And he goes, nah, it's there's a process and administrative and stuff, typical, bureaucracy,
right.
Government bureaucracy. He was like, I'll get it eventually. But he went right back in the same position that he had before.
Right.
And, everything, as far as I know, is fine with him. All right. So we got this out of our system. I don't even want to have to deal with these idiots again. Like I said, I muted them a long time ago. I usually will respond when some people that we've gotten connected with will send me something, or if I see them attacking somebody like you or, some of our other friends and stuff. I'm pretty protective of the people I consider to be my friends. I'll come out and say something, but the majority of the time I just ignore. I love that mute button on X, because then I just don't have to be troubled with any of that crap.
Right.
I am going to get to the point where when people send me this stuff, just, hey, please quit sending me this stuff. I don't want to give this guy any more oxygen. But I appreciate you taking the time to go before Congress. I think you were a good choice to come up there. I think Chris Piotto was a good choice. I think Steve Guantano, at some point, they should bring him up there. That would be something I would want to hear from, is the guy who was running the entire field office during this time. And Stephen and I have talked.
Excellent. Yeah.
There's some thing, politically, there's some things that we disagree with, but he is not this ogre that he's being painted out to be.
Oh, I
And
know.
there's been a number of times that he has stood his ground and tried to push back. And
Well, the
even though
Mar-a-Lago raid, for instance.
Yep. Even though he's at that level, those decisions were still being made by Lisa Monaco, Merrick Garland.
Of course. Most of the bad, especially from January 6th, is owned by DOJ. FBI played its role in conducting investigations that it shouldn't have been. But in terms of the charge stacking, the malicious prosecution, all that stuff, that's all DOJ. And yeah, I need to talk to Steve. I worked for him and always got along great with him, had no issues. And man, he would be a fantastic witness to hear from. I mean, like you mentioned, the guy ran WFO during all this stuff. So who better to hear from? Who better to hear from?
He and I have talked about some other things that were highlighted in the media. I haven't talked to him about his time as the special agent in charge in Detroit. But there's some other names that have popped up in media that were some FBI agents that I also knew. When you come through WFO, especially if from 25 years ago or something, there's a lot of people that go through that golden triangle that become the top executives in the FBI. And by golden triangle, I mean, you've got FBI headquarters, you've got Baltimore field office, and you've got WFO. And I know people that have never left that area and have gone from being street agent all the way up to becoming, a special agent in charge up there. I worked with this female, I'm not going to say her name. She sat next to me in the cubicle when I got to Washington field office. And she went from, I'd been there a couple of years when she got promoted to headquarters, and she went to being an SSA. And then from there, this was pre-Directorate of Intelligence setup. She kind of latched on and started working her way up there. She became a special agent in charge over the, I think it was the intelligence branch or counterintelligence or something. I'll have to go back and look, or I'll just send her a message and ask her. But she became a special agent in charge without ever having been a squad supervisor, an ASAC, an assistant section chief, or even being a section chief. She was a chief of staff for a lady that ended up being the first Directorate of Intelligence. And once that Directorate of Intelligence was set up, it became an EAD level. So when you're the chief of staff for them, you're going to become an SES. So she got moved into the SES ranks that way. It was kind of surprising when she got special agent in charge, one of the special agents in charge at WFO, because I was at a conference when, all of our Blackberries at the time went off and saying that she had been promoted to that. And they're like, what the heck? There has since been a rule, and it was named after her, about that you have to go through the path of being a field desk supervisor, an ASAC, and SAC. You can't move up that way without going through those areas. Well, John, I appreciate you coming on today. There's a ton of other things that we could get into. I'm ready to put these little miscreants behind us. I really don't care that Alex Jones calls Kyle Seraphin, top FBI whistleblower. Alex Jones is a clown anyway. That's my personal and professional opinion about him.
You're better off reading the Inquirer. I think the Bigfoot stories are more interesting.
Yeah, I think and I kind of feel bad for Glenn Beck over at the Blaze. I don't know what type of behind the scenes conversations are going on behind there, but I'm pretty sure it quickly got heated with how quick they redacted or pulled off recall that.
I've been speculating, people have been talking about, well, why hasn't she sued? If she's innocent, why hasn't she sued? Well, if they're negotiating a settlement, you're not going to hear about it. Yeah. They could negotiate a settlement and it be completely confidential, and the public's not going to hear about it. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
So lastly, so Bongino has moved on. He's going to go back to doing his podcast. Full disclosure, I and I think you have become, at least online friends with his producer and some of the people around him. I spend probably more. I've told you guys, I probably spend more of my time talking with Bongino's producer, either telling some off-color jokes or talking about grilling recipes, because the guy is a master with a grill, and I kind of show off, some of the steaks and stuff that I've cooked. Really nice guy. I hope I get a chance to meet him. He said that, the next time I get down to South Florida, I'll probably go grab a bite to eat with him, and heck, maybe Bongino comes along. I don't know. So Bongino moves along. We got Chris Ferreira in there, and you've got Andrew Bailey as the co-deputy director. I'm glad that they selected somebody from inside the FBI, somebody that understands the process and the mechanics of it. As I've passed along, and I hope the message got to Dan, I'm not going to say whether or not I actually had connection with Dan or not. I'm not going to mention any, and I don't want to give any indication that I have had connections with him, but I have passed information along that I hope that he did take to heart. He wasn't on my bingo card for being deputy director. He still wouldn't be on my bingo card for being deputy director, but I do appreciate him stepping into the breach. It takes a lot to walk away from a $4+ million career and leave your family and small children to go up there to work basically 7 days a week, probably 18 hours a day, with what you have to do. And you and I both know from our time in the FBI, that is the most difficult position in the FBI. It's far more difficult than the director of the FBI, the deputy director. And for him to walk in, I bet it was a bit of shock and awe to him. What do you mean I got to also take care of this? What do you mean I got to interview people, and for promotion to special agent in charge or assistant director? Or what do you mean I got to, address this personnel issue? Oh, and by the way, we've got these, potential national security threats that I have to deal with as well. I came up here to uncover the Epstein stuff and the J6 stuff. Well, yeah, you can do that, but you've also got, top 10 things that you have to deal with every day. So I appreciate him at least stepping into that. I do think that he left the FBI in a little better condition than he found it. I think that had there been somebody else, if they were going to do a co-deputy director, I've been on record saying I think our friend Jim Galliano would have been ideal for something like that, understanding the mechanics of it.
Sure.
He's really good at talking. People know him and respect him. And I think that he could have brought some gravitas to that, and then, let Bongino go and do the things that he wanted to do. I think that just watching the interviews about the Epstein stuff, I think he was a bit surprised at the Epstein case and the information that was there. I've been on record at saying I believe that Epstein killed himself just based on the publicly available information from looking at the photos of the crime scene. I still have some questions about some medications that he was taking. Was he still allowed to take those? Were they taken away? What type of effects did that have? As far as him being able to hang himself, whether he has paper sheets or clothing or anything like that, I've investigated enough death scenes with suicides of people hanging themselves with far less around their neck than, paper clothing. So I do think that Epstein killed himself. Do I think there was some malfeasance or surrounding his death? Absolutely. I do think that. And that malfeasance may have been, the guards that were there that were, weren't doing their job and watching over him. I don't know what the requirements were. Were they supposed to check on him every 30 minutes? He wasn't on suicide watch at that particular time. I think he'd been taken off of it, but he was on suicide watch because he tried to kill himself previously. So usually somebody that is that hell bent on taking their life, they'll try it again unless something stops him from doing it. And I think he was supposed to get a roommate coming up, and that may have pushed him as well. As far as the J6 stuff, I do think that a lot of J6 people had their rights violated. but they weren't violated. They weren't necessarily violated by street agents placing them in handcuffs and bringing them to the court. It happened with the delay in their speedy trial, their constitutional rights to speedy trial, and the conditions that they were left in there. And I do hope that somebody pays a price for that. As far as the other individuals that are out there, there are some of these investigative journalists that I don't have a lot of respect for. If they want to reach out to me, I'll talk to them and we'll see if we can work that out. Right now, I don't really respect what they do. Brianna Morello and Miranda Devine, and you and I have talked personally about why I have a problem with Miranda Devine. And if she wants to make that public, she can let me know and we'll make that public. But I'm not putting it out there yet. I still have the evidence of what we talked about. But the, where they try to spin some of these things. And I think, Brianna Morello has said there's nothing major going on. There's been no arrest, nothing from DOJ. And she ignores that there's proceedings going on in Florida right now. The cases are moving forward. They don't move at breakneck speed. I had very few cases that were knocked out in less than a year. It just didn't. That wasn't something that happened. I've had cases that went 10 plus years on the counterintelligence side. I know you work counterintelligence. Well, John, tell everybody where they can find you, what you got going on, and when you're going to get off your butt and finish that manuscript.
Hopefully that'll be done end of February. So and then we'll try to
get
it sold.
Down. So I'm writing that down.
You write it down. Write it down and underline it. But okay. I'm on X and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn.
Have you done the TikTok yet? Or are you on that?
No, I have not done the TikTok yet. I have not done the Threads yet either. So no Snapchat, none of that stuff. And then I write at I have a column at Town Hall. I also write at Restoration of America.
Okay.
And that is a news site as well. So you can find my work there too. Also, I'm working on a Substack post that will have my testimony verbatim on it. So I'll be sharing that maybe later tonight, if not tomorrow.
Okay. And I look forward to taking a look at that. The Snapchat thing, I'm especially when you get your contract with Newsmax, when they start paying you to be on there.
Yeah. Right.
Sometimes people see us on TV and they think, well, how much you get? My wife will ask it. How much you get paid for this?
Not a dime.
Not a dime. Hopefully it works into something, but I'm not a pretty blonde, so I can't get a Fox News contributor contract.
You could change your hair color, see how that works.
Yeah, well, I'm just glad I'll be 62 in March that I still have my hair. But the Snapchat thing, a friend of mine, we've been technically best friends. It feels weird at my age to talk about being best friends, but we've been friends since we were 10 years old. And his son is one of those social media influencers. And I asked him, Tyler, I said, where do you make most of your money? I said, you're on Instagram, you're on X, you're on Facebook, you're on all these others. And I said, where do you make your money? And he makes millions, several million a year. He said, Snapchat. Snapchat's where the bread and butter, where he makes his money.
Really?
So it's something we probably ought to start looking into. Well, John, thanks for coming on here. I'm going to close it out for right now. I need to head to the gym. It's Friday. I was supposed to go earlier. We've been watching our granddaughter, my
time well
son and
spent.
daughter. Yeah, my son and daughter-in-law work during the day, and they drop her off here each morning. And man, she's just an amazing baby. She's so happy first thing in the morning, and she's 4 months old today. And my oldest son, Jake, her father, he took off half a day today, and then he contacted my wife and said, I was going to come pick her up, but I know you want to have some more time with her. So he ran home to work out and all of that. I was supposed to go work out before we did this interview. So I'm going to get this polo off, put my t-shirt on, head to the gym, and try to start working off, getting some of this holiday weight off. I had gotten down to about about 180 pounds, 175, 180 pounds there back in September. and I just let it go during the holidays. So I just had my physical. I'm just under 200 pounds. Now I'm stronger. Carrying the weight around will definitely make you stronger. So I can pop 300 off my chest several times, but the recovery takes a little bit longer, and I feel better when I lose the weight. One thing real quick before we get off here, you and I have talked about, I know you've told me how tall you are. You really look tall at that congressional hearing. I was kind of surprised.
Well, I'm 6 foot even.
You look a little taller than that. I tell you somebody else that
probably the camera, probably just the camera angles.
And the other person, and we've known for years now, that I was shocked at, and that's Galliano, 6'3".
Yeah,
big dude.
He's probably I would think he's the tallest one among us
out of our group. Yeah. I mean Buford, and I'm not going to say his last name. That may be a nickname for people. We're about the same height. We're right around there. I'm probably a little taller because I still have hair on my head. My hair makes me a little bit taller. Mahoy, our other friend, I think he's about 5'10". I'm about 5'8". And then I don't know how tall Kim is. I haven't talked to her about that. I do look forward to the day we've still all got to get together. I think the plan
would be great.
Go to the farm of our friend over in Alabama. I'm here in Mississippi, but we're supposed to all, I think everybody will go, you guys will fly into Birmingham, and we'll go enjoy a nice cigar and some whiskey at the farm and shoot some firearms. Well, thanks again, John, for coming on. I'm going to try to do these a little more often now, especially
for having me.
My kids have invested in this equipment. Tell Tammy I said hello. I appreciate her allowing you to come on here with us, and best of luck, buddy. I'll see you. Heck, I'll probably see you in the chat.
We'll do. And I appreciate it. And we'll be talking to you soon, I'm sure.
All right, brother. All right. Bye-bye. Bye. All right. That was John Nance. We were just kind of riffing here. There was no set agenda other than that we were going to talk about his testimony before Congress and about these individuals that got themselves fired for the FBI. And that's really all I want to talk about with them. They're really kind of an annoyance. It's like dealing with small children that just want to complain about stuff. They don't have any real substance to their argument, and they can do whatever they want to with it. Post some more, little Kyle can post some more pictures, sexually explicit pictures, if he wants to. It kind of shows who he is. But I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen in. We give some candid conversation here, and it's based on our knowledge, skills, and experience. I don't try to say anything or give an opinion on something that I don't have some substantive experience about. It is humbling with the people that I've come in contact with over the past little over a year that I've been on this social media thing. Look forward to it growing and bringing some more cogent information. I really want to focus back on the Constitution and the law. We're going to talk some more about some online debates that I've had with some individuals out there, still undefeated on that constitutional debate stage. And that's not just hyperbole. It is. I love mixing it up with people that are willing to be civil when we talk online. But thanks again for watching. Again, you can find us on X here at BF Conservative. You can find us on YouTube, and hopefully this thing is broadcast into Rumble. I want to give a shout out to some of the people that we've mentioned here online. That's Ada Nestor and Gary Heasley at WWDB out of Philadelphia. I hope to be on their show again here soon. We've got some things we want to talk about. My friend Chris Salcedo out in Texas. Chris has become a really good friend over the past couple of years with getting the opportunity to be on his radio show and television show. And shout out to everybody else out there, especially the street agents of the FBI that are out there putting themselves in harm's way and doing things that would surprise you at what they do to protect your liberties every day. Thanks again. I'm going to get in here and visit with my little granddaughter and then hit the gym. This is the